पूरा खाली में जब भाग जाए सबके सब भाग जाते हैं जिंका चिका लिख दे बायोलॉजी सुंदर अक्षर में मैम कुछ बताइए जो बॉटल लगता है अब ना आप तो देख आज तो फिर पकड़ने वाली एटलीस्ट एसिड एंड बेसिस बोलने वाली मतलब केमिस्ट्री के बजाय ना एसिड एंड बेस बोलना उस केमिस्ट्री में एटलीस्ट मजा आता है वो और खाती होगा और सबको रीड करने का चांस वो नहीं देती है वो मम्मी तुम सीधा बैठो तो ऐसा भी हम ऐसे बैठते रहते ऐसे सब बैठो तो ऐसा ही बैठो आई टुक चिल अप यस यस एक्चुअली वो बोलती भी है हाँ एवरीबॉडी शुड बी लिसनिंग टू मी नोबडी विल स्लीप एंड चिल्लाती तो वो चिल्लाती है हाँ वो जैसे गिर जाता है आप पे जब बायो लिख दो दे बायोलॉजी सुंदर अक्षर ना माशाल्लाह ऐसा ऊपर एकदम टॉप पे बायोलॉजी बोल दे हमने नहीं लिखा वो होगी वैसा लिख कर बैठे तो की हैंडराइटिंग में अच्छा आती है केमिस्ट्री में लिख भी देती बट ऑलराइट केमिस्ट्री में फिर भी अच्छी बायो से वर्ड सुनी कोई नहीं ये चिल्लाती वो सारा अरे बैठ के तो ऐसे ना और अगर मैम प्रकट हो जाती तो नहीं सुनिए तो अच्छा होता मेरे को चिढ़ आ रही है तो जैकेट भी नहीं पहना ठंड भी लग रही है तुम लोगों को ठंड नहीं लगती क्या लगती है बट हम कुछ करने हमारी तो सर आकर कहते कि बायो का आपको क्या वही तो पता है टीचर अभी वाला बायो की खोल रखी वो बंदी बैक स्ट्रेट शिट अप ऐसा मतलब ऐसा मेरे साथ सुनो तो हंसोगे मत भाई मेरे को एक से चाहिए मतलब फर्क नहीं पड़ता मुझे इधर लगा इधर की बात एक सेक्शन ऑफ डिवाइड हो जाए कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता मुझे मेरे को बस जाओ तुम सब बर्फ में वो पहचानते कहां पे आ जाते हैं देखना लगता है किसकी शक्ल दिखती है बच्चे इतनी बोल्ड थोड़ा सा दिख रहा है कुछ भी नहीं बंदी के अंदर मुझे ग्राफिक्स करने चलेगा मजा कहां से बात कर रहे हैं आई वो कोई बॉडी में तो लिखा ही नहीं है किसके क्वेश्चन आ रहे हैं तो वो किसी अभी संजय को कैसे इसका टाइम मैच नहीं होता है लेकिन मैच कर रही हूं रीड है ना चलो वो मैं जाकर मेरे को आसपास नहीं क्या रहा है
मेरे को मैथ में बैठा है सेम टेस्ट थोड़ी होगा सेम टेस्ट होता है हां किसी का तुमने रीटेस्ट दिया रीटेस्ट नहीं इसी क्यूटी में रीटेस्ट का मार्क्स पसंद नहीं आया तो एक और बार नहीं चीजें भी मैंने एक अटेम्प्ट दिया था लेकिन रीटेस्ट नहीं मैंने एक बार जब उन्होंने कहा रीटेस्ट दे सकते हैं बट क्वेश्चन पेपर सेम ही होगा क्वेश्चन पेपर सेम होगा हां ऐसा आपने कभी तो बोला था कभी तो पूछा था बस तो कोई भी जा सकते हैं बार बार एक बार पूछते हैं आज क्योंकि मेरे को 11 तो लिखने थे अभी लास्ट में किसी लाइक देखो ना क्लास टेस्ट में भी ये चीज ये पढ़ाया फाइल में पढ़ा से फिर कहाँ तक पढ़ा एनारोबिक हमने रेस्पिरेशन एनिमल्स को ना ब्रोंकियोल्स एंड एल्वियोलस को हम कर रहे थे तो आगे ये हुआ रेस्पिरेटरी ये हो गया था ये भी हो गया था ये भी हो गया था सब हो गया भाई बच्चे ही टॉपिक हो गया तुझे करना और फिर एक टॉपिक मेरा बचा है कर दो कोई सादा एक तो मैं वीडियो में पीछे के साइड नहीं चाहती हूँ एक्चुअली बस वो ट्रांसलेशन रखने का बाकी है एक बार 11 बजे एक मिनट गूगल से पता है ना मैं पेंगुइन की तरह बहुत रील्स नेक्स्ट ब्रेक में ओरियो खाएंगे नेक्स्ट ब्रेक में खाने से मेरे मेंटर मेंटर मैंने जोर से बोला कि मुझे देखो मेरा दिमाग का सटका हुआ था नहीं 11 बज चुके हैं मैम प्रभु ने बहुत कुछ वैसे लग रहा है ना पढ़ना पढ़ना जाएगा अभी तो बीच में पता मैम इसको अनबिताया वाला सब सब लोग और वो मेरे को ये बोला ना उसको बोला तो उसकी वजह से मेरा ऑलरेडी बहुत फ्रस्ट्रेशन था और मैंने पहले तो रिद्धि को थोड़ा किया तो ये बात इसमें मुझे डायरेक्टली नहीं तो दोबारा को जाके इसे सोनल और कौन सा सोनाक्षी तो बोला ये बात आने लगता है कि नहीं बोला क्या बोल रही है बोलना तो मैं डायरेक्ट सोनल सोनाक्षी कभी हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं एक मिनट तीन साल और ऊपर से मैं जो खाया मुझे पकड़ उस दिन भी पीटी के आए हम लोग सिमरन मेरी बेंच पे हम बैठी मैंने जैसे उसके देखा क्लास के अंदर ही गए ये मेरा दिमाग खा जाके नहीं करके मेरे को बंदी को तो उसके जैसे ठीक है अभी इसको लड़कियां काफी मैं लेकिन मैं मुझे वॉशरूम के हाथ में करके और ये जो सोनाक्षी का प्लस ये रिड्यूस कर अच्छा तू जब जाने ना आ रही सही तो बोला यार गलत नहीं बोला मैं चुपचाप आई क्लास में चुपचाप मतलब देख दो बोल और उसको मत मुझे लगा चिड़ेगा या थोड़ा I know
What are we studying? Respiration start किया? क्या complete किया हुआ है? इधर आ. Get your bag, get your books, fast. The last one, get up from there. हाँ, respiration क्या था? Last topic, what did we study? अच्छा, only the respiratory system we have studied. Huh? So now let us start with this. So all of you check respiratory system we were studying the other day. The parts, functions first of all. Again, let us talk about the concept of the system and the parts. What are the functions of the respiratory system? What did we learn the other day? Today we are going to talk about a concept of respiration. So the other day we studied respiratory system. respiratory system that we studied the other day, all of you take a look. We were talking about the nostrils, the organs in a sequence we had written down. Did we write down the organs in a sequence? What are the organs in a sequence? Nostrils, nasal passages, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and the lungs. Now, talking about the parts of the respiratory system, the other day also I was telling you that what are the parts of the respiratory system? Just give me a minute, I want to find out the answer. So now, talking about the respiratory system, look into these parts. The writings are lazy, not a problem. We talk about the nostrils, the nasal passages, meaning this particular region, nasal passages, followed by the pharynx. Can you see here? I think we had written function of the pharynx the other day, which is a common passage for food and air. This pharynx, can you see the inhaled air also passes through and the food also passes through? Clear? That much you are able to see, no? Though it is a bit hazy. So this is the pharynx we are talking. That's the reason the function of the pharynx. What to be written? Common passage for food and air. Because, yes, it is a common passage because the air and the food can pass through. Next, the rest of the parts we had come across, that is the rest of the parts if we come across now. What are the rest? We talk about the larynx, this particular region. What is the larynx made up of? It is a cartilaginous box. Inside the cartilaginous box, there are fine threads of connective tissue. Now that we inhale the air passes through those fine cords, which vibrates and produces the sound. Voice box. What about this now? Talking about the main parts of the respiratory system. Let us have detailed look at this. I talk about this particular structure. Look into this, the trachea. Can you see? Now that we talk about the trachea, can you see? Over the trachea, there are fine ring-like structures. What are these rings made up of? Cartilage again. The entire trachea is known to have such like C-shaped ring-like structures made up of cartilages. So we will say that what is the job, what is the function of these C-shaped cartilaginous rings? To give shape or structural framework to the entire trachea, because the trachea otherwise is made up of soft, smooth muscles. If these C-shaped cartilaginous rings would not have been there, then possible every time that we exhale out, the trachea would have collapsed. And every inhalation would have spent so much of energy taking in air. But we are not even aware how many number of times we are inhaling, because the process is involuntary. The process is quite smooth. This is the trachea which bifurcates to form two narrow tubes. What are these narrow tubes known as? Bronchi. Each of these bronchus will again divide to form a series of tubes. What are these series of tubes known as? Bronchioles. And what will end up with the bronchiole? The bronchiole will every time terminate with a fine small air sac. What are those air sacs known as? Those air sacs are known as the alveolus. If you look into these figures, the air sacs, what are those air sacs known as? These are known as the alveolus. So let us talk about this type of a structure. Every single alveol, the bronchiole will terminate to form a air sac known as the alveolus. So now we have to look into the structure of the lungs today. The major respiratory organ. What are lungs made up of? What are their special features? How do they become the special organs for exchange of gases, etc.? So talking about this, first of all, understanding the trachea. I said the trachea is made up of what? Smooth muscles. On the outer surface of the trachea, there are some C-shaped cartilaginous rings which provide a structural framework to the trachea. The trachea bifurcates to form two tubular structures which are narrower. What are these tubular structures known as? Bronchus, plural bronchi. Let me talk about the bronchus of one side and we try to understand that how do they bifurcate. They would generally bifurcate like this, resulting in the formation of one system of tubes. These are also known as bronchi. This is known as the primary bronchus. This is known as the secondary bronchus. Secondary bronchus, secondary bronchus. I talk about the bifurcation of the secondary bronchus known as the tertiary bronchus. Each of these tertiary bronchus will again bifurcate to form narrower tubes. And at the base of these narrower tubes, what are we going to come across is a bunch of this sac-like structures. What are these known as? Alveolus. What are these? These are the alveolus. How are they arranged? In the form of a bunch of grapes as it. So talking about this entire structure, if we have to draw the entire organ, this is how we can draw. This is how one single lung look like. If we complete the arrangement of all these tubes. So again, if I talk about one such tube like this, let us again complete this. So if this is the primary, secondary, tertiary, so these are the bronchioles. And then they will again terminate to form this type of balloon-like structures. And what are these balloon-like structures known as? These are known as the alveolus. These are the alveolus. So the lungs is generally made up of a number of such sac-like structures, millions of them all throughout. Now, if this is the lungs, then what is at the base? At the base, there is an arrangement of muscular tissues. If this is the lungs, there is an arrangement of muscular tissue. So here also, let us try understanding that this is the primary bronchus we talk about. If this primary bronchus is broken this way, bifurcated this way, resulting in the formation of another system of tubes like this, which again unite and terminate to form this type of structures, then I would say that this is how the lungs are arranged. This is how the lungs are arranged. So at the base of the lungs, there is a dome-shaped, at the base of the lungs, there is what? A dome-shaped, a curved muscular sheet. What is this curved muscular sheet known as? This curved muscular sheet is known as the diaphragm. We are going to understand now what are the major parts of the respiratory system. Major parts of the respiratory system to understand: trachea, bronchi. Let us label all these parts now. This is the trachea. What about this? This is the primary bronchus. This is the primary bronchus. Plural is bronchi. I would talk since I am naming only one of them, so I am writing the word bronchus there. Next is, this is the secondary bronchus. This is the secondary bronchus. What about this? This is the tertiary. You don't draw this, you will have to draw the complete system later. Tertiary. What about this ones? These are the bronchioles. And what about this air sacs? These are known as the alveolus. Plural is alveoli. So these are the words to remember. And what about this dome-shaped muscular sheet? This is known as diaphragm. So these are the major parts. The C-shaped cartilaginous rings that I have drawn, remember, they are partially also present in the bronchus. Okay, so these are the parts first of all. talking about the trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveolus. Features now one by one we'll have to learn. Terms are clear? Which is which part you are clear? After some time I'll give you the labelings you'll have to do. Tell me the labelings, then only I'll ask you to draw the diagram. Now we are going to understand the concept of breathing. Functions, I think we had already understood functions for each of the parts, no? Check your notebooks. I think functions for each of the parts we had studied the other day. Nostrils, I said, what is the special feature? Ciliated epithelium, it has filters the air. Nasal passage warms the air, makes the air moist. So these are the functions we write. Pharynx, common passage for food and air. Larynx, voice box, correct. Trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, function same, passage of air. But special features for the trachea, C-shaped cartilaginous rings. What about the bronchus and the bronchiole? They are narrower tubes formed by the division of bronchi. What are bronchi? If at all you get a question, what are bronchi? Narrower tubes formed by the division of the trachea. What are bronchioles? The minutest tubes formed by the division of the bronchus. This is what you should write always. Okay, next is what? We talk about now the alveolus. What are alveoli? The structural and the functional unit of the lungs. Did we write that? Structural and the functional unit of the lung. That's the typical definition that you will have to write whenever you are asked, what are alveoli? Alveoli are the structural and the functional unit of the lung. Hundreds present. And then, now we talk about that if you have to understand the process of, respiration under what phases? We want to understand the method of respiration, the process of respiration. So, under what phases are we going to study the process of respiration? Under 4 phases. One is breathing. Second is gaseous exchange. Third is tissue respiration. And fourth is what? Cellular respiration. Okay, so this is what we'll have to study now. The concept of respiration under certain heads. The concept of respiration under certain heads we'll have to study. Now, to understand the first part, that is breathing. What is the basic concept? What is your name? Uditanshu. It's a typical name. What is the meaning? Rising something. Okay, very good. Will you please go to the office and ask for one blue and one black pen? Okay? Please, I'll wait till that time. Now, the previous concepts that we had discussed on respiration was, I think, basically on the rate of breathing of a terrestrial organism with that of the aquatic organism. No, that was a concept that we had studied. We just discussed the other day. So what was it? The rate of breathing of a terrestrial organism is more, or the rate of breathing of an aquatic organism is more? Aquatic organism. What did we discuss? Why is the rate of breathing of an aquatic organism is more?
Because oxygen is less
In the water. Okay. So if some of you had not taken a note of that, again, there's a small paragraph in your book mentioning about the concept of respiration in a terrestrial organism and aquatic organism. And the other day I told you that if at all you have noticed a fish in the aquarium, If at all you notice a fish in the aquarium, you will always see that okay, thank you. If at all you notice a fish in the aquarium, you will always see that the operculum of the fish, no, that those shields that they have, smaller, bigger fish, they always have a shield-like structure, no? That shield is constantly moving up and down of those fishes. But what about us? The nostrils are not up and down at all. Meaning, at one breath, involuntarily, at one breath, we take in a large amount of oxygen from the air. And that aquatic organism in the water, it has to take in so much of water through the gills, then only that small amount of oxygen it gets. Talking about the breathing rate in 1 minute. In 1 minute, we roughly breathe about 18 to 24 times. For a fish, it is more than double. For a small fish also in the water, it is more than double. Why? Why it has to spend so much of energy taking that water through its gills, taking the water through the gills? Because it has to, or from that one rush of water, it will get a small amount of oxygen. And for us, one breath, we get a large amount of oxygen. So to conclude, I would say that 1 ml of air and 1 ml of water to compare, where is oxygen more? 1 ml of air. Air has a larger amount of oxygen as compared to water. So that is the concept. So straight away I want to go to the first part of the concept of respiration, breathing. What is the definition? What is breathing? The taking in of air till the lungs. So I said, whenever I'm talking of breathing, it is just a physical process. Breathing is just a physical process where there is no formation or breaking of any new compounds in our body. No chemical change is actually happening till the time I talk about breathing. No chemical compounds are formed also, broken also. I'm only talking about the air rush till the lungs. And another phase of breathing, air coming out from the lungs. So now, what are the two steps or the two phases of breathing? One is inhalation. And what should be the other one? The other is exhalation. But before we talk about the concept of inhalation and exhalation, we also have to remember that this lungs that we talk about, there is a protective bony structure surrounding the lungs, and which is that? The rib cage. We have got the rib cage. So the concentration is on two major parts of the body. One is the diaphragm, and number two is the rib cage surrounding our lungs. So to understand the concept of breathing, we have to remember that what are some of the, I just now mentioned that it is just a physical change happening in our body. Allow the lungs get filled with water, and another set of changes allow the lungs to get shrunken down, only this much. There should be certain changes happening in the chest cavity which allows the lungs to inflate and get filled with the air, and another set of changes which allow the lungs to get shrunken down, air rushed out. So the definition of breathing we will write first, and then we go ahead with the steps. Definition of breathing, let us write. What is the definition of breathing? The process of taking in of air, process of taking in of air into the lungs, process of taking in of air into the lungs and giving away air from the lungs, and giving away air from the lungs. Process of taking in air into the lungs and giving away air from the lungs. Clear, right? So that is a concept of breathing. Sometimes children would write answers like this. What is breathing? The process of taking in of oxygen and giving out of carbon dioxide. Is that a correct statement? Correct answer? Correct, hai? taking in of oxygen and give, that is the most common answer that is seen in the paper. Taking in of oxygen and giving out of carbon dioxide. Is that breathing? Think. वो breathing हो सकता है? But now that you are inhaling, nostrils में कोई filter है कि only oxygen अंदर जाएगा? नहीं. Always remember the process of taking in of air, not oxygen. Process of taking in of air and giving out of air. That is what is breathing. There is no confusion how I write down the definition of breathing. You are nowhere to write the taking in of oxygen and giving out of carbon dioxide. That is absolutely wrong. So now I'm talking about, first of all, to understand the concept of breathing, what are the two major parts we concentrate on? एक है diaphragm and दूसरा है the rib cage surrounding our lungs. Let us understand this way. First is, how will inhalation be favored? Inhalation, just after we have finished one exhalation, now next what happens? Rib cage जो है, the rib cage starts moving forward. Because of muscles which are there on the inner lining of the ribs, they will contract and the ribs start moving little bit forward and upward. So इससे horizontal space of the chest cavity increase हो रहा है. Horizontal space increase हो रहा है. Diaphragm जो normally थोड़ा curved रहता है, the diaphragm now contracts and becomes flat. उससे vertical space increase हो रहा है. Yes. So this diaphragm, if it is a concept of inhalation, the diaphragm is becoming flat. तो ये vertical space increase हो जा रहा है of the chest cavity. और ribs जो यहाँ पे है, the ribs are moving in the front. तो horizontal space भी increase हो गया. I will say the space of the chest cavity increases. So which are the two reasons, which are the two structures which help in increasing the space of the chest cavity? The ribs and the diaphragm. So normally अगर ribs just after exhalation, ribs यहाँ पे है, the ribs are moving little bit forward and upward. The diaphragm जो little bit curved था, the diaphragm contracts and becomes flat. So because of these two conditions, when you are inhaling, you can try it out for yourself also. जब हम एक थोड़ा सा deep breath लेते हैं, what do we feel? As if our chest cavity is expanding, increasing. Yes or no? Because of the ribs moving forward. Ribs moving forward and upward, and the diaphragm contracts and flat. This increases the chest cavity space. अब जब space has increased, the pressure inside the lungs is lesser. Pressure inside the chest cavity अभी less हो गया because space ज़्यादा है and air in the lungs is lesser. So we would say the pressure inside the chest cavity has decreased. Because of that, air can rush in. Air is rushing in. What concept are we understanding? Movement of the air from a region of high concentration. कहाँ पे? Atmosphere. From atmosphere, the air can easily rush in now. So atmosphere is a region of high pressure. Now our chest cavity is a region of low pressure. Air is moving from a high pressure area to a low pressure area, and the lungs are all distended. The lungs are all filled with air. I will say the lungs are inflated. So what is the concept? I am saying, what are the events one after the other? Let us try understanding. What are the events? Inhalation, what happens in our body? Inhalation first is the ribs are moving. Ribs move outward and upward. Outward and upward. What about the diaphragm? Diaphragm contracts and flattens. Diaphragm contracts and flattens. So because of these two changes, the space of chest cavity increases. The space of the chest cavity increases. And because of this, the pressure inside the chest cavity is lesser. And air fills inside the alveolus. alveoli are inflated. Alveoli inflated. Inflated matlab filled with air. So that is what we are talking about during the concept of inhalation. What are some of the major parts? Some of the major parts to remember, we are talking about the ribs, we are talking about the diaphragm, and lastly we are talking about the alveoli. What is the relation? So this is about the concept of inhalation. The concept of exhalation is just the opposite. If you have understood what happens in inhalation, you should be able to now tell me what are some of the concepts of exhalation. And I just now mentioned the concept of exhalation is just the opposite of inhalation. Let us come across. What are the concepts of exhalation? All of you understood what are the concepts of inhalation? And I said जो inhalation के concepts exhalation से just opposite है. I'll give you 1 minute. Complete. And then now bolo. Alveoli are inflated. Inflated मतलब filled. जैसे हम एक balloon को जब when we fill in air, what happens to that balloon? Inflated. And when all the air will come out, what will happen? Gets shrunken. Now tell me what should be the changes. I said the concept of exhalation. I now want to know exhalation में क्या होने वाला है. For exhalation now, the steps are just the reverse. So what will happen now? The ribs during inhalation was here. Now that the lungs are filled with air, immediately the ribs go back. Diaphragm जो flat था, immediately diaphragm starts getting contracted. Diaphragm contract हो गया. Ribs यहाँ पे था, ribs go back to its original position. So ribs going back to original position, horizontal space कम हो गया. Diaphragm ऐसे था, diaphragm अभी dome shaped, curved हो गया. So vertical space कम हो गया. Meaning in one word I will say space of the chest cavity decreased. So space of the chest cavity जब decrease हो रहा है, will the lungs be shrunken or they will inflate? They will shrink now. The lungs are constricted, they are shrinking now. If the lungs are shrinking, will the air be forced out? Yes, the air is forced out of the respiratory passages. That is what we are talking about as exhalation. So exhalation के events क्या होने वाला है? Tell me. Ribs move outward, meaning inward. Ribs move inward and downward, not upward, downward. Diaphragm flattens. No, I'm sorry. Diaphragm becomes curved. Diaphragm relaxes and not flattens, becomes curved. Diaphragm becomes curved. Okay, space of the chest cavity decreases. Air fills inside, rushes out now. Air rushes out from the lungs, and alveoli are not inflated, they are constricted or deflated. These are the words you should know. Constricted, or just the opposite word of inflated is deflated. Constricted, same meaning. ये आया समझ में? The event of breathing. What happens during breathing? Inhalation followed by exhalation. And what are the physical changes? Did we talk about any compound getting formed or broken? Nothing, nothing. It's only how air gets filled inside the lungs and air is rushing out from the lungs. Clear है? Now we have to understand the rest of these stages. But the rest of the stages is all happening in the inner regions of the body. Let us come across. Let us come across what are some of the concepts of exchange of gases now. to understand the concept of exchange of gases followed by tissue respiration. I'll show you some figures at the same time when I explain. You should be able to understand this. All of you clear till here the concept of breathing? Any doubt? Any doubt? यहाँ पे कुछ भी doubt है? Are you clear about what is breathing? What are the two phases of breathing? Inhalation, exhalation. What happens to the ribs during inhalation? Ribs outward and upward. What happens to the diaphragm during exhalation? It relaxes and becomes dome-shaped or curved. Which are the muscles? Now there's a mention of the muscles. Muscles, not much to remember. Just this word to remember there, that is intercostal muscles. Where are these muscles located? In the inner region of the ribs, which help in the movement of the ribs. The role of the intercostal muscles is not mentioned in detail in your portion, but which muscles, if at all you get this question, name the type of muscles which help in the movement of the ribs. Because whenever we are talking about the movement of any bony part of our body, muscles contract and move the bones, right? We are saying that the ribs are moving. The entire ribs is a bony structure, then there definitely should be some muscles which are helping in the movement of the bones. Which are those muscles which help in the movement of the bones? Answer is intercostal muscles, which are present on the inner regions of the ribs. So that is only for the name. The role of these muscles you don't have to study as such. So for the concept of inhalation, you are separately to remember what happens to the ribs for each of these stages, what happens to the diaphragm for each. When does the space of the chest cavity increase? Inhalation. Write one major reason for filling up air inside the lungs. Increase in the space of the chest cavity. Okay. I said write one major reason why should air fill inside the lungs. Because the space of the chest cavity increases, so atmospheric air can straight away fill in. So remember, read the question properly and answer. Now, since we have to go to the next three concepts which are studied always in a sequence, for that we first of all have to understand what is the blood supply. Blood supply to the lungs. Now, something more that we have to come across is that lungs are the major parts, lungs are the major structures which help in the process of exchange of gases and henceforth. So I said that after the process of inhalation, what is the condition inside the lungs? Every single alveolus filled with air. And hence we study the rest three stages: exchange of gases and tissue respiration and cellular respiration. We will go ahead. But before that, we also have to understand that why the process of exchange of gases should happen at the level of the alveolus. Why not somewhere else? So for that, we'll have to come across that what are some special features of the lungs which help with the process of exchange of gases. So exchange of gases bronchi में क्यों नहीं हो रहा है? Exchange of gases trachea में क्यों नहीं हो रहा है? That's a question. Why are we always studying exchange of gases here at the level of the alveolus? Because every single alveolus has some special feature. What are those special features of the alveolus? Almost same like what we had studied for the villi. What were the two major features of the villi which help the process of absorption? Okay, same here for the lungs also, same here for the alveolus also. I said one single lung will have almost millions of alveoli, so large surface area. Apart from that, one single villus, what were the two structures, two features we mentioned? Extremely thin wall. And one more. One single villus, what are the two special features? Thin wall. Or dusra? Second feature was what? Large number of blood vessels. Same here for the alveolus also. So here I am showing you one image which is very clear to understand. I talk about one single alveolus. Every single alveolus is largely supplied with blood vessels. So now I am understanding that what about the blood supply to the lungs? Yes, the lungs are always pinkish organs in our body. Why pink in color? Extensive supply of blood vessels. Likewise, if I talk about the internal regions of our body, almost every part of the body appears a little bit darker, red, pinkish because of the surface covered with blood vessels. But exceptional structures or exceptional features of the lungs, if I have to mention to understand these, we'll have to talk about some features of the lungs. What is it? One is that the lungs are extensive spongy structures. Why spongy? Because each of these alveolus, they are all air-filled. They are not solid structures, they are all air-filled structures, and they are having a rich supply of blood vessels. Rich supply of blood vessels. So now, here we are talking about that. What are some special features of the alveoli? That also will have to come across. I said, what are some special features of the lungs? The lungs are spongy organs. Rich supply of blood vessels that give the pinkish texture, pinkish color to the organ. Now, talking about the blood vessels related to the lungs, two major blood vessels that you should know. Starting from the heart, I would start from the heart, and I understand that this heart gives rise to one blood vessel, and that is known as the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery. What type of blood does this pulmonary artery carry? Deoxygenated blood. You have come across this word, deoxygenated blood? Yes, can you tell me what it is? Deoxygenated blood, matlab? Rich in carbon dioxide, not absence. हम absence कभी नहीं बोल सकते. Rich, meaning I would say this blood has 70% carbon dioxide, 30% oxygen. 60% carbon dioxide, 40% oxygen. Oxygen है, but carbon dioxide थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा है, by 3, 4, 5, 10%. Carbon dioxide ज़्यादा है, but oxygen absence नहीं है. Then this blood is going to the lungs. From the lungs, now that the blood comes out, the blood now from the lungs, or the vessel which comes out from the lungs, is now, the blood is oxygenated. The blood is oxygenated, and the vessel, what is the name of that vessel now? Pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein. Where will the pulmonary vein enter? The pulmonary vein will again enter into the heart. I want all of you to take down this flowchart. Blood vessels supplying blood to the lungs and the connection with the heart. Name the blood vessel which carry deoxygenated blood to the lungs. Pulmonary artery. Name the blood vessel which carry oxygenated blood away from the lungs. Pulmonary vein. We'll have to remember a difference between the words oxygenated and deoxygenated also. First you take down this flowchart, then we'll have to write down the definition for oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Are you understanding? Clear? Wherever there's a doubt, clarify. Once you are done with this, let us write one question. Differentiate between oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. The same concept we will need in the next section of the chapter also, transportation. Differentiate between oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Write down. For oxygenated blood, write down blood that, first point, the blood that contains higher proportion of blood that contains a higher proportion of, what you are writing? Deoxygenated you are writing?
Oxygen.
Blood that contains a higher proportion of oxygen than carbon dioxide. Higher proportion of oxygen than carbon dioxide. Other side, for deoxygenated, blood that contains a higher proportion of carbon dioxide. Blood that contains a higher proportion of carbon dioxide than oxygen. Okay, now second point you write. For oxygenated you write down. Carried by blood vessels known as arteries. For oxygenated blood carried by blood vessels known as arteries. Carried by blood vessels known as arteries and pulmonary vein. Carried by blood vessels known as arteries and pulmonary vein. Other side. Deoxygenated, carried by blood vessels known as veins, and pulmonary vein. No, artery. Correct. Carried by blood vessels known as veins, we are writing deoxygenated, and pulmonary artery. Clear head? What you have written, is it understood? So you are writing difference between oxygenated blood, deoxygenated blood. We have to understand what is meant by gaseous exchange, tissue respiration and cellular respiration. Now for that, we'll start understanding with the concept of an alveolus. The alveolus has got large number of blood vessels. What are some special features of the alveolus? What are some special features of the alveolus? That also we'll have to write. Let us complete this at one go, then we start with the process. Write special features of the alveolus. Write special features of the alveolus. Write special features of alveolus that enable exchange of gases. Write special features of alveolus that enable exchange of gases. Special features of alveolus that enable exchange of gases. Write down. Every single alveolus has the following features. Every single alveolus has the following features. Put a dash, number 1. Put a dash, number 1. batch number 1, a very thin wall made up of one single layer of epithelium, a very thin wall made up of single layer of epithelium. Number 2, an extensive network of blood vessels. An extensive network of blood vessels. Extensive network of blood vessels. Okay, so now to understand the concept of gaseous exchange. So you are now very much clear about the concept of alveolus. What are the special features? The wall is very thin. So just now you had written the wall is very thin, hence the process of diffusion possible, and it has got large number of blood vessels surrounding, hence the process of diffusion again possible. So let us start understanding the first concept, that is exchange of gases. I am talking about an alveolus. What is this that I have drawn? This is our alveolus. Features, we are very much clear now. You had written down the features. After the process of inhalation, look into the figure. After the process of inhalation, what is expected is the air that is filled in the alveolus, will it be rich in oxygen or carbon dioxide? Why? Atmospheric air it is, no? So since we are talking, what happened? Sleepy over. I am talking about the air just after the process of inhalation that is filled in the alveolus. It should have a higher proportion of oxygen than carbon dioxide. Why? The reason is because it is the atmospheric air that is filled in. Atmospheric air, any specific volume of atmospheric air, if I check, it has 21% of oxygen and roughly about 0.03% of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide much lesser than oxygen. So that is the reason we are saying yes, in the alveolus, at any time, the oxygen is much more. What is the fate of this oxygen? The fate of this oxygen is, I am first of all talking about this blood vessel which is carrying blood from the heart and moving towards the alveolus. So I may talk about this particular blood vessel as what? This is the pulmonary artery, and what type of blood is it carrying? It is carrying the deoxygenated blood. Now this blood which is deoxygenated, it has, but since it is blood, it will have a specific type of cell. What is this cell? RBCs. The blood has RBCs, and on top of that, these RBCs have got one particular pigment. What is this pigment? Known as hemoglobin. What is the definition of this word hemoglobin? It is a red color respiratory pigment. Let us write this. Define hemoglobin. What is hemoglobin? Why is the blood red in color? So all referring to this word. What is hemoglobin? Let us write down. The red colored respiratory pigment. The red colored respiratory pigment present. The red colored respiratory pigment that is present surrounding the red colored respiratory pigment present in the RBCs, which is responsible for which is responsible for the color of the blood, which is responsible for the color of the blood, which is responsible for the color of the blood. Okay, now again we continue with this figure now. Try to understand step by step. So I'm saying now that these RBCs are there and RBCs have got the pigment hemoglobin. Here oxygen is more. I'm comparing the alveolus and the blood vessel. Here oxygen is more. Here oxygen is less in the blood. So what should be the direction of movement of the oxygen from the alveolus towards the blood? What process am I talking about? Diffusion. Movement of the molecules from a region of high concentration to a region of its low concentration. Any time in the body, whenever we are comparing the blood vessel and the alveolus, at any time of the day, whenever we are comparing the alveolus and the surrounding blood vessels, alveolus always has a higher concentration of oxygen than the surrounding blood. So if that is true, then the direction of movement will always be this one. Now, inside the blood vessel, a temporary compound known as oxyhemoglobin is formed. Hemoglobin is what just now you had written? A red colored pigment. Respiratory pigment. Why the word respiratory pigment? Because it has got a great affinity for the respiratory gases. It can easily form a bond. Oxygen, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, all these. So now that we are talking about what is the name of this compound, the name of this compound is oxyhemoglobin. What is oxyhemoglobin? A temporary compound formed where? In the blood or in the alveolus? In the blood. A temporary compound formed in the blood when the oxygen diffuses from the alveolus, hemoglobin of the RBC, and oxygen forms a temporary compound. Now the blood is circulating. Any single blood vessel we are thinking of, there are hundreds of blood vessels, we are thinking of only one single blood vessel, and this one single blood vessel passing through the alveolus. What is the change in the type of the blood? The blood which was being brought near the alveolus was deoxygenated, and now because of the oxygen diffusion, the blood is becoming oxygenated. So the blood was deoxygenated when it came near the alveolus. Now that it is going past the alveolus, the blood here is now oxygenated. The blood here is deoxygenated. So oxygen diffusion enough has happened. As a result of oxygen diffusion, now what? A temporary compound known as oxyhemoglobin is formed. But now I also need to understand that when the blood is flowing, in what form is the oxygen carrying? In what form is the blood carrying the oxygen? Is it possible that sometimes it carries oxygen as oxygen molecules ever present? Never. I repeat my sentence. Try to understand what I'm speaking. I'm saying this is a compound which is formed of oxygen and hemoglobin. Are we to understand that oxygen is transferred or transmitted, or oxygen is transferred always in this form? Yeah, ऐसे भी possible है कि oxygen is getting transported in the blood as oxygen molecules. कभी भी ऐसे possible होता है? No, oxygen is never getting transported as oxygen molecules in the blood. तो oxygen transport हमारे body में कैसे होता है? Always as oxyhemoglobin. हीमोग्लोबिन के साथ बॉन्ड बनके ही ऑक्सीजन ट्रांसपोर्ट हो सकता है ब्लड में. सेपरेटली ऑक्सीजन मॉलिक्यूल्स will never get transported.
Leaving the same for carbon dioxide.
Partly. Carbon dioxide has got other methods also. So ये हो गया. So now when this oxyhemoglobin comes near body tissues, ये मैंने क्या ड्रॉ किया है? Some body tissues. Think of the muscles. Think of the stomach wall, pancreas, everything, every organ. Bone hai, muscle hai, any organ you can think of. So when this oxyhemoglobin in the course of blood circulation When this oxyhemoglobin कोई tissue के सामने आएगा, then what is the fate? Then this bond between the hemoglobin and oxygen will break. Then what will happen? This oxygen will straight away diffuse towards the tissues. I talk about any other oxyhemoglobin molecule. I talk about other oxyhemoglobin molecule. Is the story the same when they are passing through any tissues? Yes. हर एक oxyhemoglobin का story यही रहेगा. Whenever the blood is passing through the tissues, hemoglobin and oxygen का break the bond will break, oxygen will move towards tissues, hemoglobin will remain in the blood. Can you now tell me why is the oxygen moving from the blood to the tissues? यहाँ पे oxygen कम है, यहाँ पे oxygen ज़्यादा है. The rule of diffusion we are studying all throughout the process. ये पूरा जो process हम सीख रहे हैं, the concept is only diffusion, nothing else. So oxygen is diffusing from the blood towards the tissues. The reason only is here oxygen is less, here oxygen is more. So here oxygen less जो है, what is the reason that here oxygen is less? Every single cell of the tissue, why the oxygen is less? I want to understand. The oxygen, why is it less in the tissue cells? Because the tissue cells has got food, glucose by the method of digestion, assimilation, absorption. The previous part of the chapter you had studied. Digestion होने के बाद absorption होना है. After absorption, assimilation, and by assimilation the body cells will get the nutrients in the form of glucose and fatty acids and amino acids. Clear है that part? So I'm now thinking of, I now want to understand body cells में why the oxygen content low हमेशा क्यों है? Because every body cell which has glucose will utilize the oxygen for the breakdown of the glucose and result in the formation of the carbohydrate and form carbon dioxide, water and energy. Why does every single cell of the tissues have low oxygen? Because this oxygen is used up in the breakdown of glucose, thus releasing carbon dioxide, water and energy. This was the basic concept of respiration. So I would say that means every cell is having so much of carbon dioxide. Every cell, every tissue cell will have so much of carbon dioxide, that means. So then what should be the direction of the carbon dioxide transport? From the tissue towards the blood. I talk about a comparison of the stomach wall and the nearby blood vessel. Carbon dioxide transport कैसे हो रहा है? From the stomach wall towards the blood vessel. I talk about the blood vessel and the muscle cells. Carbon dioxide transport कैसे होगा? From the muscle cell towards the blood. Am I understood? So here, this is what I am talking about. Think of any tissue of the body. Stomach wall, intestine, blood, the bone, the muscles, any particular tissue organ you can think of. Concept same रहेगा, no change at all. Every single tissue cell has less oxygen. Reason ये है, as a result of this, carbon dioxide is produced. Hence, the tissue cells have more of carbon dioxide. यहाँ पे carbon dioxide ज़्यादा, यहाँ पे carbon dioxide कम. That's the reason the carbon dioxide is diffused towards the blood. Clear है? Now we want to know then what is this concept known as a diffusion that is happening between the blood and the tissue. इस concept को क्या बोलेंगे? This particular concept is known as tissue respiration. Whenever we are studying a concept of exchange of gases between the blood and the tissue cells, you are not listening at all. You are not listening at all. These things you have not studied at all in the 9th. So you need to listen. I brought you from there here so that you can concentrate. there's no change in you, I see. Now, when I'm talking about an exchange of substances, gases that is happening between the blood and the tissue, what are we to name this process as? Tissue respiration. Inside the cell, the breakdown of the glucose with the help of oxygen. What is this process to be named as? This process is named as cellular respiration. And when I talk about the process of exchange of gases between the lungs and the blood vessel, then what is this particular process known as? This particular process will be termed as what? Gaseous exchange. This particular process is now known as gaseous exchange, when the exchange is happening between the lungs and the blood vessel, gaseous exchange. Blood vessel and the tissue cells, tissue respiration, and whatever is happening inside every single cell, cellular respiration. So this was the second and the third and the fourth step of respiration. We started with breathing first, and then this is the second, the third, the fourth phase. Let us complete with this part now. What about this carbon dioxide? Now, this carbon dioxide which is released, what will be the fate of this carbon dioxide? A small fraction of this carbon. Now, the carbon dioxide has got two pathways to follow. One is a greater fraction of carbon dioxide will get converted to bicarbonate ions in the plasma. Carbonic acid, also known as carbonic acid or bicarbonate in the plasma. And only a small fraction will bind with hemoglobin, same like oxygen. What is the reason? Hemoglobin likes oxygen more. Affinity for oxygen is more. Affinity for carbon dioxide is lesser. So the bond formation with carbon dioxide is lesser. So unlike oxygen, where we studied, all of the oxygen binds with hemoglobin. No, all of the carbon dioxide does not bind with hemoglobin. Only a small fraction binds. The rest remains in the plasma. What is plasma? The liquid part of the blood. So the carbonate will be present in the plasma. This has nothing to do with lungs. This will be released out by the process of excretion, kidneys, etc. This is something to do with lungs. So because of circulation of the blood, now I understand, because of circulation of the blood, if at all, this compound comes, now that it comes in contact with the respiratory surface, what will happen now? The bond between carbon dioxide and hemoglobin will break, and what will happen? Carbon dioxide will enter the lungs. Reason is what? Whenever you are comparing the lungs and the nearby blood vessel, this has less of carbon dioxide than the blood. This has more of oxygen than the blood. So if I again have to talk about oxygen, yes, I will say oxygen will move in this direction. Yes or no? Why does oxygen move in this direction? Answer is very simple. Concentration of oxygen here more, here less. Blood vessel I'm talking about. And the blood vessel always has more of carbon dioxide, less of carbon dioxide alveolus. So the direction of carbon dioxide is always this way. And now that you talk about exhalation, the exhaled air has more of carbon dioxide. I started the story this way. What about inhalation? If I have to talk about inhaled air, what about the inhaled air? More of oxygen. And now if I talk about the exhaled air, what about the exhaled air? Exhaled air has more of carbon dioxide. It is carbon dioxide rich. Now look into this. Are these concepts clear to you? First of all, exchange of gases, oxyhemoglobin. What happens to oxyhemoglobin when it reaches the tissues? Bond between oxygen and hemoglobin will break. Oxygen will move here towards the tissues and immediately used up for the breakdown of the glucose, resulting in the release of the carbon dioxide. So the tissue cells are filled with carbon dioxide, saturated with carbon dioxide. That's the reason. So carbon dioxide will definitely start diffusing in this direction. But the carbon dioxide will take two different forms. Only a small fraction binding with hemoglobin, the rest remaining this way. So this compound, along with the blood flow, when they come near the alveolus, carbon dioxide will go out, diffuse, break the bond, and enter into the alveolus again. Clear, eh? So we had studied breathing, we had studied exchange of gases, tissue respiration, and cellular respiration. So look into this flow chart, look into this figure diagram, and try answering some of the questions that I ask you. After that, I'll give you something to be written. Number one, name the temporary compound formed between oxygen and hemoglobin. Where is oxyhemoglobin formed? Near the respiratory surface. So इसको बोलेंगे respiratory surface, इसको बोलेंगे tissue surface. Tissue surface. Where is oxyhemoglobin broken? Tissue surface formed respiratory surface. वो याद रखना है. Near the alveolus it is formed, and near any tissue it is always broken. What are the two forms in which carbon dioxide is transported? Carbonic acid, and this is a temporary compound of hemoglobin and carbon dioxide. The name is not there in your portion, so I'm not mentioning also, not needed. But there's a name also. This one I said this is to be termed as a tissue surface. Matlab I am comparing a blood vessel with the wall of the stomach, blood vessel with the muscles of the leg, blood vessel with the wall of the liver, tissue surface. What is meant by cellular respiration? Breakdown of glucose to release carbon dioxide, water, and energy. What is this mode of respiration also known as where oxygen is used? Aerobic respiration. Give me an example of this type of a cell where aerobic respiration is happening. Example of an organism where cells will show this type of a process. Aerobic respiration. Human. Cells of human, cells of a plant. Aerobic respiration. And we are talking about carbon dioxide released, and the carbon dioxide will be released out during the method of exhalation. There's a small activity in your textbook. Take a look. That when we are talking about the concept of understanding that the exhaled air has more of carbon dioxide. Let us come across. Exhaled air has more of carbon dioxide. So now, whenever we look into this, can you see this activity there? Can you see this activity there? Now, this is an activity to give us a very clear idea that the exhaled air has more of carbon dioxide. What are we doing? We take a test tube. In this test tube, we fill 3/4 with a solution, a chemical solution known as lime water. What is the chemical composition of lime water? The chemical composition of lime water is calcium hydroxide. So now I'm talking about this test tube, 3/4 filled with lime water. And then we try exhaling with the help of a glass tube. You go straight away into the test tube. With the help of a narrow glass tube, we try exhaling air into it. Whenever we are exhaling air into it, after about 5 to 7 minutes, enough. We are exhaling air into this test tube, into this lime water. In lesser than 10 minutes time, what do we get to see is that a reaction between calcium hydroxide, that is the lime water, and carbon dioxide has happened, resulting in the formation of a new compound, that is calcium carbonate. How are we able to see? The lime water, which was transparent earlier, now has become little bit turbid. मतलब एक whitish like suspension जैसे बन रहा है. Something like when I take water and put some chalk powder in it. तो chalk powder जब डालेंगे कैसे होगा, एक granular suspension जैसे बनता है ना, exactly same like that. So we can understand that there is something a turbid nature हो रहा है. The transparency is gone, and then there's a turbid nature which is getting formed. That is what we say the lime water is becoming milky. What is the new compound formed? Calcium carbonate. Why? Because exhaled air has a lot of carbon dioxide. Now tell me, we are not talking about exhalation. I just keep this lime water, 3/4 filled with lime water. ये test tube को मैं ऐसे एक 8-10 घंटे छोड़ दूँ. I'm just keeping it as it is. We are not exhaling air into it. Will the lime water turn milky at all? Will it turn milky? Okay. What about the time period? Will it be 10 minutes enough होगा? Because exhalation में we saw that 10 minutes, 15 minutes लगता है. But I'm now leaving the test tube as it is without exhalation. Can I expect the lime water turn milky even now? Half an hour में? But शायद 2 घंटे में. After 2-3 hours, I will come across, हाँ, lime water थोड़ा तो change हो रहा है, that transparency is gone and it is becoming little bit milky now. तो इतना time क्यों लगा? Because there is less concentration of CO2 in the air. When I talk about 1 ml of exhaled air, 4% carbon dioxide है, and when I talk about 1 ml of atmospheric air, 0.04%, much difference. So there's a big difference I'm talking about. So that is the reason exhaled air has more of carbon dioxide than the air in the, or than the atmospheric air. That's the reason with the atmospheric air also it will show that turbidity, that milky nature, but it will take a long time. अगर exhaled air से 10 मिनट में हो रहा है, atmospheric air से maybe 2-4 घंटे में the process will happen. So that is what are we to understand. Now, with this entire concept of respiration, this is what you'll have to study. The respiratory system you should know, the parts, functions you should know, and this. So what was the first part of the chapter that we studied was the overall chemical equation. The overall chemical equation, we had studied 3 pathways of glucose breakdown. We had studied respiratory system, we had studied, and now the entire mechanism of respiration we studied. Clear hai? Now, I'll give you 5 questions, try answering. Take out your notebook. Take out your notebook. The volume questions also will have to solve some of them. Take out your notebook, write down number 1. Without referring the previous notes, try to answer. All of you will be honest, no? अभी break होने वाला है. Nobody will refer to the previous pages or the textbook. Break के बाद मुझे भरोसा नहीं है तुम लोगों पर. Break के बाद 2 questions. Better than. या तो सारे answers you will check during the break and all of you will be able to write all answers correct. Check if there is any doubt. Look into the text questions then. Text के जो questions है NCERT पहले देखो. How many of you have the NCERT textbook? उस section के questions go through. Let us try answering those. Some we will just discuss out. Some we will just discuss. Go to the respiratory section and check what are the questions given. Check what are the questions given. Not this, the textbook. Textbook. You have the textbook? No. Textbook. NCERT. All है. अच्छा. And the respiratory section के questions देखो. What are the questions they have asked? Number 1. Read out. Number 1 क्या है question? हाँ. नहीं है. Read out. Now, one question is about the characteristics of the lungs, about the characteristics of the. हाँ, go to that next page. Next page में जाओ. हाँ, questions क्या है देखो. दे. That's हाँ. Read out.
What advantage over an aquatic organism does terrestrial organism have with regard to
So this we discuss, no? What are the advantages? What is the advantage of a terrestrial organism? This is what we had just discussed when we were talking about breathing. What is the advantage of a terrestrial organism in comparison to the aquatic organism? So how are you framing your answer? Aquatic organism needs to spend more amount of energy in the process of breathing. It needs to breathe more number of times per minute as compared to a terrestrial organism. Why? What is the reason I told you? Because the amount of oxygen dissolved in the water is much lesser than the amount of oxygen present in the air. So in 2 paragraphs, you will have to write your answer. Clear hai? Is
Why fish dies when it is kept out of the water?
Because of the concentration of the salt and all. It is not because the oxygen in the water is less and now you keep it outside, it is very happy to get that oxygen. Never mind, it is now in a terrestrial environment. It has so much of oxygen, but is it able to use that oxygen? It is not able to use that oxygen because it has gills as the respiratory organ. It has gills as the respiratory organ. No, for example, we have got a thin layer of fat in the skin. So if we go to the very cold areas, very cold countries, or in the polar regions, will we be very happy that we are free from that hot and that humid environment? Now we are in a very cold. Will we be very satisfactorily able to withstand those cold conditions there? Why not? Because the layer of fat beneath the skin is so thin for us. For the fish, it is in the water. Though the oxygen is less, it has only the gills as the respiratory organ. We take it out, keep it in a terrestrial environment. It has so much of oxygen, but that oxygen it is not able to utilize. It does not have the lungs. It has still the gills. So the air is not entering through the gills. When the water rushes through the gills, then only that organism is able to take that oxygen. For the air to get inside the body, it should have nostrils and the trachea and all these structures, which the fish does not have.
And then how does the respiration of dolphin and whales differ?
Dolphins are mammals. It does not have gills. It has not lungs. So remember, every time it is coming to the surface of the water, it is not for entertaining you. It is every time coming to the surface of the water to take that oxygen from the air.
But they take in water also, so don't their lungs fill with water?
No, it has got those blowhole to rush the water out from the body, because through the mouth the water enters. It's an aquatic organism also, no, at the same time. So ये excess water निकालने के लिए through that blowhole. So again, all these features are natural processes for that organism. Even those blue whale, the whales, they are also every time coming to the surface of the water. Though these are aquatic, they have got lungs as a respiratory organ. So in the submerged conditions, they cannot take water from the oxygen from the water. They don't have methods by which the water will rush through the body and blood vessel oxygen trap kar lega. No, that method unke paas nahi hai. The oxygen has to enter their respiratory passages. So the whale and the dolphin, they have to come to the surface, take the oxygen enough for some period of time, they go down again.
But whales are the deep sea animals, so.
So whales are, so every time, not every time, at a particular period of time, meaning period gaps hai. So when they are coming to the surface, they are taking in adequate oxygen enough for some period of time, half an hour, 1 hour ke liye enough hai, because their body movements are very slow, not like us. So energy requirement for them is much lesser than our body. So body movement for the whale is so slow, it's not so. And for us, it is so much. So for us, energy requirement is more. Whatever amount of oxygen that whale takes in for 5 minutes, enough for 2 hours. Expenditure come hai. For us, whatever we take in, 5 minutes mein whatever oxygen we take in, maybe for us 1 hour or half an hour mein khatam hai. Because for us, every time muscular contraction is happening, no, the expenditure of energy, oxygen is too much for us. So remember this exceptional aquatic organisms which are able to survive in the water only because they have got lungs, and every organism which is a developed complex organism but in the water, they will never be able to take in oxygen from the water. They will always come to the surface of the water, take oxygen from the air. Dolphin, whale, these are exceptions that we are talking about. Go to the next question.
What are the different ways in which glucose is oxidized to provide energy?
ये कौन सा answer है? This question, which is the answer for this question? What are the different ways in which glucose is broken down? What is the answer? Which answer are we talking about? That flow chart I have discussed. Remember the 3 pathways of glucose breakdown. अगर abundance of oxygen है, then what are the products? Carbon dioxide, water, 38 ATP. अगर lack of oxygen है, then what are the products?
Lactic acid.
हाँ, lactic. Example, muscle cells. Okay. Complete absence of oxygen है, then what is the prominent product? Ethanol, ethyl alcohol. Go ahead. Next question.
How is oxygen and carbon dioxide transported?
Okay. How is oxygen and carbon dioxide transported? Is the answer given in the volume check? I think so. It's given. दिया है क्या? Oxygen carbon dioxide transport is a major question asked in your paper separately for oxygen or carbon dioxide or together as a 3-mark question. Answer दिया हुआ पीछे देखो, volume के पीछे. How is oxygen and carbon dioxide transport? Last pages में answer दिया हुआ. Last pages में answer है क्या? Question है, answer नहीं है.
The question is in the textbook.
नहीं, answers तो था ना.
The question is.
है, answer है.
The blood brings CO2 from rest of the body.
कौन सा page? कौन सा page?
195.
195.
95 ना आंसर
है ना?
95
हाँ, answer था ना, पहले तो था. We had given the answers here. एक बार check करो.
I think question is different. The question after that question is difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Please answer this fact.
Aerobic and number 16. What is it? Transporting. Number 16.
On 159 it is written, the blood brings CO2 from rest of the body to alveoli and O2 from alveolar air.
There are 196.
150.
9.
159. कौन सा statement?
Exchange of gases.
Exchange of gas. Okay. हाँ बोलो.
The blood brings CO2 from rest of the body
हाँ.
to alveoli
हाँ.
and O2 is
in the alveolar air is taken up by the blood in the alveolar blood vessel to be transported to all cells in the body. यही ना? This statement देखो. The blood, what is the statement saying? The blood brings carbon dioxide. The blood, look into this figure. The blood brings carbon dioxide towards the alveolar surface, gives away carbon dioxide to the alveolus. Similarly, I am talking about these alveolus. I go back here. I talk about the alveolus. Alveolus gives oxygen to the blood, which is transported to the tissues. From the blood, the tissues get the oxygen. And then carbon dioxide coming to the blood. The blood carries carbon dioxide to the respiratory surface, gives carbon dioxide to the alveolus. That is what is written in that statement. Read and tally with this diagram.
There's another answer on page 196.
196.
Right on the top.
The function of circulatory system. Okay. ये तो है. I think. हाँ, oxygen transport ही है ये, है ना? अच्छा, this oxygen carbon dioxide transport, I am giving one proper answer. Proper answer you should be able to write. It is given part wise दिया है, but we will try to write one proper answer after the next.
गिर गया
मेरा 22 और 28 और केमिस्ट्री में ऐसे केमिस्ट्री दिया नीचे
लोग कहने के बारे में हमारे आप बर्फ बोलेंगे मिल
अरे यहाँ लोग बिजी तो मैंने सिखा मैं तो लेके आई मेरे पास हो गया फोन कर देती और उन्हें पे अभी छोड़ा 6 मिनट लेट है हम लोग पहले याद रखो यार हाँ हाँ बोलना लेट है ऐसा ही है स्मेल में अलग है टेस्ट पे ठीक है स्मेल अलग है उसके बाद
कल क्या था
समझने में कैसा लग रहा है
तो इन्होंने मुझे मिस दिखाया है
हमारी बिस्किट हमारी बिस्किट पार्ले-जी ऐसा
मैं कल शाम को टाइम पर चेक कर क्लास डांस वो भी जो मैंने लिया भी नहीं है क्लास और ऐसे ही नहीं टेस्ट सीरीज में मुझसे रहती है ना चैप्टर जैसे जैसे कंप्लीट होता है मेरे वो मेरे ऊपर है कि इसे कब देना है
वो कैसे कर सकते हैं रीटेस्ट वो बनाना होता है तो चलेगा आज चलेगा
और पांच का बोले क्या मैं डिक्शनरी ले लूं
क्या
मैं जो है पांच में दे दे मैं डिक्शनरी ले लूं
जीरो
और पांच है पांच डिक्शनरी
इसके बाद कैश नहीं होगा
ठीक है मैं कोई कैश नहीं से क्योंकि वो आपका 15 में
मेरा एजीसी वाला गलत और मेरा सी वाला सब गलत था मैंने एमसीक्यू वाला बैलेंसिंग गलत थी मेरे बहुत मिस हुई है मेरा फर्स्ट एमसीक्यू पे डबल थी सिंगल की जगह डबल स्टेशन लेता था बहुत कटने चाहिए